Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished viewers from around the globe, welcome to our 5th session of Connecting Ports, the interactive talk show that bridges gaps, sparks conversations and fosters connections across the world maritime communities. We are delighted that you found the time to join us today as we embark on another dialogue in the ever-evolving world of international trade and transportation. My name is Christina Prieser. I'm economist and associate partner at HVCC, Hamburg Port Consulting, and I'm honored to guide you through today's session. Broadcasting live from the heart of Hamburg's historic warehouse district, we are here to initiate meaningful discussions on topics that count. Debating what matters is our guiding motto. And all of you, our audience, joining us from around the world, and your opinions, they absolutely matter. So don't be shy and share your thoughts, questions and ideas via the chat on today's captivating topic, and together let's gain a thorough understanding of its significance for our community. Today we are diving deep into the world of maritime digitalization, focusing on Maritime Single Window, Port Community System, Port Call Optimisation, trying to answer the question if we are ready to drive on the highway to end-to-end digitalization of maritime trade. The concept of a maritime single window is aimed at simplifying and streamlining customs and border crossing procedures through electronic data exchange. The debate here centers on the harmonization of systems across different countries and regions. There are discussions about how to ensure data accuracy, data sharing protocols, and the potential resistance to change from traditional paper-based processes. A port community system seeks to enhance communication and coordination among various stakeholders within a port. The debate surrounding PCS often revolves around interoperability and standardization. How can different port community systems seamlessly communicate with each other, especially in a global trade context? Additionally, there are concerns about who owns and controls the data within these systems and how they are governed. While Port Call Optimisation promises increased efficiency and resource allocation through data analytics and predictive modeling, the debate often circles around the challenges of implementation. Questions arise about the accessibility of real-time data, the cost of adopting these technologies, and the potential disruptions to established workflows. Moreover, there are concerns regarding data security and privacy in an increasingly connected port ecosystem. These concepts are interesting for our debate as they represent significant shifts in the maritime industry, challenging established practices and requiring collaboration among various stakeholders. Balancing the promises of enhanced efficiency, transparency and sustainability with the practicalities of implementation, data security and governance is at the heart of these considerations. We will see how our speakers shed light on the various concepts and what insights we take away from today's discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us today are 3 remarkable personalities who have made significant contributions in this field. It's a great honor to welcome Captain Subramaniam Karuppiah from Malaysia, the current president of the International Association of Ports and Harbours, advisory board member of Asia-Pacific Economic Corporation's Port Services Network, and Secretary General of the Eastern Dredging Association. He's a true leader in the global maritime community, as his career developed from being a master mariner in the Merchant Navy to harbour pilot of Port Klang and to general manager of Port Klang Authority. So, Captain Subra, it's a great pleasure to have you with us today. Next, I'm happy to introduce Slavia Jumelet, product owner of operational efficiency vessel standards at the Digital Container Shipping Association in Amsterdam. With her background in mathematics and transport and port economics, as well as her experience in the dry bulk and container shipping industry as terminal and route planner and as commercial line manager, Slavia represents here the shipping perspective on the subject of port call optimization. And we are looking forward to have valuable insights. Thank you for joining us, Slavia. And last, but certainly not least, we are delighted to welcome Gerald Hirt, the Managing Director of the Hamburg Vessel Coordination Center. Gerald brings into our discussion a multifaceted perspective spanning river traffic coordination, terminal planning, and his active role within the International Task Force for Port Call Optimization, where he actively contributes to shaping standards for just-in-time vessel port call optimization. And HVCC plays a pivotal role as a central, neutral, cross-company coordination hub of arrival, routing and departure planning for large vessels, feeders and barges in the port of Hamburg. So, very warm welcome, Gerald. Now, before we embark on an engaging conversation with our guests, we have a little video treat in store for you. Enjoy. So, dear audience, let me remind you, your active participation is essential in making this talk show a truly interactive and engaging experience. We want to hear from you. So type your questions, thoughts, ideas and stories in the chat, and let's make this discussion as lively as it deserves to be. It's your chance to interact with our speakers. Let's start with a question to Captain Subra. So, why is the digitization of the maritime sector important for the competitiveness and resilience of global trade?
Thank you, Christina. Good day to everyone. Thanks to HPC for organizing this webinar. It's truly remarkable timing, I think, for us to get into this conversation and deal with some of the issues that are at hand. So I think the important thing here is the whole digitalization of the maritime business is something that has been lagging behind for a long time. We realized during the COVID-19 pandemic, there were a lot of issues in terms of communication, in terms of data transfer, when we could not get our documents across, and that had caused a lot of issues for the smooth flow of trade. And I think this is something that we need to deal with right now, and we realize that digitalization is the way to move forward. In a global economy with trade taking place across the world, we need to get information across quickly for businesses to thrive. And so I believe this is why it's so important now that we need to deal with this important topic. And in the interest of facilitating trade, especially maritime trade and logistics, and I believe this is the way we should go. And we need to ensure that whatever that we are planning to do right now, it is executed properly.
Thanks. We are discussing today the three important initiatives: Maritime Single Window, Port Community Systems, and Port Call Optimisation. And the definition of single window, maritime single window, and national single window is still very fluid. And there's even some confusion between the role of a port community system and the role of a maritime single window. So, Captain Subra, can you help us to bring more clarity into the differentiation and their role within the digitalization of the maritime supply chain? So what is a single window and how does it differ from a port community system, and why is it a window of opportunities?
The maritime single window is a term we have coined to actually refer to how information is passed which deals with government authorities as well as agencies. We deal with a lot of agencies when we are talking about cross-border trade, even when it comes to documentation and so on. And we are referring to ships. Then we are also dealing with a lot of government agencies. So a single window basically means that we are able to use a common platform where we are able to communicate between various parties for the purposes of getting information across for approvals. But when you look at community systems, whether it is port community systems or trade community systems, we are looking at simplification of processes which deals with the trade itself. For example, when we are talking about port operations, we're talking about logistics operations, when you're talking about the whole supply chain management, there has to be a common platform where information can be exchanged end to end. And that means that there must be efficient means of getting that information across for businesses to move. So on one hand, we have the port community system that runs the trade and runs the port operations and the logistics operations. On the other hand, we have the single maritime window, or the single window, which deals with government agencies and so on. So this is where both the systems at some point has to connect. So the business world will then connect to the government regulatory agencies so that the whole trade is then able to move. So in my view, both of these are very important. I think this is where parties have to work together to build both the systems. On one hand, the government's responsibility on the maritime single window, and on the other hand, the business community, the port operators, the port authorities' responsibility to build up the port community system.
Thank you very much, Captain Subra. I wonder what the role of both concepts play for the Digital Containerization Shipping Association's point of view. So, Slavia, could you detail that briefly and in the process explain what DCSA's mission is and how the port industry can benefit from its work?
Thank you, and good day to everyone. Yes, of course. So Digital Container Association, we came into place because carriers, container carriers, they agreed that there is a lot of problems in the data exchange existing today. and it's not solvable on your own. Therefore, they established a Digital Container Shipping Association with a mandate to prepare the foundation for future digital solutions. Of course, the foundation comes with the standards, because if everyone will create their own way of communicating, their own way to standardize things, it will not help the seamless data flow. And the need became that we do need to speak the same language. For this, we do need to establish the same terminology. And that is our task, the primary task from our founding members, container shipping lines, to create a foundation, to create standards that enable digital interoperability, not only between the carriers, but also carriers are a part of the larger ecosystem. So it goes much more beyond the carriers. The data has to flow from between carriers as a partners, but also to terminals, to ports, specifically to port community system. There's a lot of data has to flow also to terminal operating system. And we make sure at the DCSA that the standards that we are creating is actually functionable and very useful for all the stakeholders in the supply chain involved. And our mission also is to drive adoption, because standards are only useful when they're in use. So it's also one of our tasks and responsibility to drive the adoption beyond our founding members, who already represents the 72% of a container traffic worldwide. So that is very substantial portion. But at the same time, we are in a business where everyone has a very high reliability on each other. We always have to rely on the partner information. We always have to wait for counterparty to provide the timely information. So it's essential that not only carriers, but also terminals and the ports and other stakeholder providers as well, like solution providers, nautical service providers, freight forwarders, and many, many other people and the companies down the supply chain also in that journey together with us.
Thanks, Slavia. So you mentioned already the strong cooperation needs, and let's now get more specifics from a port and terminal perspective. So Gerald, HVCC is a pioneer in optimizing the port call for all vessels coming to the port of Hamburg. How is Port Call Optimisation revolutionising data exchange between vessel and cargo handling processes?
Yeah, good day from Hamburg to all of you. How is it revolutionising? I would say the revolution is really about the collaboration that Slavia also touched a moment ago, and it's about digitization. And to my knowledge, there are 2,000 ports in the world, 6,000 terminals, 18,000 cargo vessels worldwide. And somehow they need an appointment with each other every day, 24/7, 365 days a year. And the revolution is really about coming over the hurdle of fragmented communications. We touched the point earlier, telephone, email, Swiss attachments, Excel, PDF, unconnected systems, and the lack of standards, which is very important also for the work of the ITPCO, which we will talk about later. The lack of standards really means that there's a revolution, that in our industry, we come to a common understanding about very simple things like what is an estimated time of arrival. I'm pretty sure if you ask 3 people here in the Port of Hamburg, you get 5 different answers about what is the ETA. And this is really what is the problem. It's simply impossible to operate effectively a fleet of ships calling at hundreds of ports, or organize terminal operation if you work according to different standards with all your different customers from all over the globe. So I believe the revolution really is Port Call Optimisation brings standardization, digitization, and for the Port of Hamburg, I would also add the term of coordination altogether. That is the operational aspect, I would say. But there's another aspect. It's about the environment. Shipping also accounts for 3% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And I think this is also sort of revolution that the industry is moving forward, because every ton saved of bunker due to Port Call Optimisation is a step forward.
Thank you very much. Is there already kind of standardized master, and since when is that actually a topic and you are working with it?
ITPCO, for example, and Slavia can add the carrier's perspective. ITPCO started back in January 2014 as a neutral platform to put forward standards, and the aim was really to realize safe and sustainable burst-to-burst navigation. And in that respect, it's really important to note the work of the ITPCO, and in particular of Captain Ben van Scherpenzeel, who really put here the foundation for the entire industry in the last 9 years, which is the basis for the corresponding IMO reference data model. And I think it's there are three different data sets that we have to distinguish here, also to operate sustainable maritime single window, port community system, port management system, you name it. These three different data sets are nautical data for safe navigation, and we move here more and more from paper-based to digital maps. They must be compliant with the rules and regulation and the standards of the International Hydrographic Organization. We have operational data, which is in particular important for us as a subsidiary of the terminal operators here in Hamburg. There we talk about the planning and the execution of operations. So we see here more and more the transition coming from telephone, etc., what I mentioned earlier, to API-based data exchange, which is important for us for efficient ship-to-shore communication. And thirdly, we have administrative data. So carrier ship to the authorities, they must be in line with the regulations, with the notifications, with the declarations. And we see here a migration from manual, paper-based, port individual notifications to a truly single truth under the maritime single window. So these are the three different things for us, very important. Of course, the operational data, where we talk about the ETA, which comes from the carrier, the requested time of arrival, which comes from the port, and any notifications to the authorities, to the BTS centers, customs, health, etc., which are crucially important to optimize a port call. So this is, let's say, the framework that we set in the last couple of years.
Thanks, Gerald. And Slavia, what does it take to implement uniform standards that apply to all carriers for all ports worldwide? Secondly, how can processes and formats be standardized if, in practice, the ports have different infrastructures that result in individual processes and often have different levels of maturity of the digital infrastructure?
Yes, I completely agree with you indeed. We are in a very versatile world, and the level of maturity for ports, for terminals, but also for carriers and for other stakeholders is very different. And of course, the journey will be also unique for its own organization, right? For every party, it takes its own journey how to get there, but the goal is the same. So what does it take? I can say probably the first of all, it's a willingness and commitment. Of course, to have eyes on the same goal is very important. And from DCSA perspective, we started with the carriers, obviously pinpointing a similar direction, similar goal to achieve. Operational efficiency gains, everyone is experiencing waiting time, idle time. We are tackling this problem through standardization, but it's important to promote this dialogue also beyond the carriers group, and also to get parties that are reliant on this information involved, such as, for instance, like Gerald mentioned, terminals, because the port call planning starts between a terminal and a carrier. So it's crucial important to get this agreement, to get this data flow seamlessly, to get the understanding of the right data set provided timely when it can be still actionable. And the second part of your question, how do you do that given that all the ports are very different? There is a saying that if you've seen one port, you just have seen one port, because looking into another port is very different. it goes also not only into the infrastructure and limitations, but also to the business environment. There are different parties having different business units and responsibility within the port calls, if you look at a different location. However, it goes around the level of granularity and, of course, level of details. So for standardization efforts, we look at the input and output of the processes. So what data has to be provided to whom at which stage of the process, and who has to act upon that. So what is the output of the process? The sub-processes underneath this, it can be still pretty much subject to whatever is happening for this specific port. And of course, there will be some differences here and there. But again, we're talking about the data set that has to be provided on the global level. So if we talk about COPRA or stowages, then we know exactly what this information has to contain. And there is no differences between, okay, you provide it in one format and in one way in one location, and another location, it already goes at different formatting, different timelines, different everything. So that is the beauty of that. You started to work in phases, but indeed the level of details is crucial here, and the level, and also the way how do you convey the message. The point of the standards is that you enable the data flow not only via one platform, but all platforms have to talk to each other. They all have to be capable to exchange this information.
Thank you, Slavia. Captain Subra, could you please reflect on what we have just learned from Slavia? How to agree on standards for digitization from a port's perspective if there are strong differences in infrastructure, processes and interest?
Yeah, absolutely. What Slavia said is absolutely true. Different ports have different challenges, and we are all at various degrees of implementing some of the solutions that we are looking for. Infrastructure is other issue. Many ports around the world are trying to get their infrastructure improved, and therefore there is a lot of challenge that we face when they are dealing with such matters. But the point that that we need to take note is this is something that is happening around the world, and we need to actually try to coordinate better, and we need to get the standards streamlined so that everyone is talking on the same language, everyone is talking on the same standards. And we think that this is something that is achievable. Maybe we can't do it immediately, but I think we are on the right track. We have already had several committees who are working on this. I believe the work done by the Digital Shipping Association is something we can reflect on. And they have brought a lot of issues to the surface where there are varying degrees of understanding, and this is something that we need to work on towards the future.
Thank you very much. Just a gentle reminder to our audience, please, if you have any questions, please write them down in the chat. We will try to get that to our speakers. Now, let's summarize briefly. There are reasonable standards, and it is feasible for all stakeholders to agree on them. So what about implementation? Captain Subra, do you know how many % of the ports do benefit from a maritime single window today? And why did the industry take so long and waited for the International Maritime Organization to implement a maritime single window regulation from next January before taking action?
Well, I don't have an exact figure of how many ports are already implementing the maritime single window, but I know many ports have some sort of systems that is working at the moment. And the only thing that is probably differing from one another is each of them have developed this previous to the standards that have been prescribed by IMO. So there could be an issue about the level of standardization, which will probably also bring some problems towards the interoperability of such systems. But at the same time, it's good that this whole thing has been brought to the attention. You know, IMO actually started this way back in 2018, but it took about 5 years for us to agree upon its implementation. And we think that that is because many ports around the world have got their own challenges. But when the pandemic took place, it was an opportunity for us to realize that we needed such a system to be talking to each other. And sometimes we say, why did it take so long for us to implement such a system? Because I don't think we were under a lot of pressure previously before the pandemic to actually get a common system across the world. But when the pandemic happened, we realized that that was when we learned a lot of lessons. There was a time where we realized we need to move faster. Because companies and ports who had similar systems were able to operate during the difficult times of pandemic. And this is where the other ports learn from them. So I would think that, yes, we took a long time to come to this, but it's never too late. And this is something that we need to work together now. I just hope that many ports are able to meet the deadline that we have on 1st January 2024. And I would also hope that, you know, there could be some delays in some ports, but there has to be some form of understanding that these ports are already developing such systems.
Okay. And do you think it is possible to monitor the implementation? That is, how to make sure that all these initiatives pay off at the end? And what would be the right incentives for getting into implementation mode?
Well, certainly we need to monitor the implementation of the Maritime Single Window. Firstly, I think there will be a lot of feedback from the shipping community. They will be giving the information back to the authorities and also to the IMO. But I would suggest that countries, ports and countries should also take their own initiative to carry out audits on their own to ensure that they are meeting the standards that are required. And I would think that this is something that has to be done on a continuous basis. We are not going to get this right immediately. Those who have just recently started or those who are intending to start next year, it will be a challenge ahead for them. And I think it is a learning curve as well. But most of the applications for Maritime Single Window is already established. So I don't think it'll be very difficult. But of course, there'll be problems, and we need to identify as we go on and try to resolve them.
Okay, thank you very much. There is one question from the audience here, Captain Subra. If you can answer very briefly, what is the IMO compendium and how is it related to a Maritime Single Window? Quick answer, please.
Okay, IMO compendium gives us a set of data that has been standardized and harmonized. So what it makes, what it deals with is simplifying the way reporting is done so that we do not need to give information that is irrelevant. So we hope that authorities around the world will use this compendium to actually receive the information that is required by each member country or member ports. So that is a form of standardization that I think has resolved some of the issues we had earlier.
Thank you very much. So speaking about implementation, Slavia, in 2020, DCSA announced to roll out standards for digital exchange of operational vessel schedules. Could you give us a bit more information about the nature of this standard and where are you now regarding its global implementation?
Yes, sure. Operational vessel schedule is one of our standards, I would say, followed by track and trace, so in early 2020. And it aimed to standardize the way container shipping line schedule exchange between the partners. That was the first layer. But very quickly, our members realized that terminals are significantly and severely involved in this process, so it would make sense to evolve the standards to make sure that it's also transferable to the terminals and other parties down the line. So it is a schedule that is exchanged between vessel schedule agreement, VSA partners, and terminal operators. So it's not the same as a commercial schedule. We make a distinction between that and the very early stage. And OVS, as we call it, operational vessel schedule, it of course contains the data on the long-term schedule, coastal schedule, all the exception handling. So if you have a mission of a port call, it's highlighted there in a very standardized way. And also the part of the standard is a universal service reference and universal voyage reference, which is a big problem, maybe not very, let's say, spread and very known problems, but for the terminals, they constantly need to align the service references between the partners' vessels, and the same goes for the voyages. And I know that Gerald has very good experience with that because right now our members already some of them implemented the standard and now testing it with the terminals, one of the terminal also in Hamburg. And the rest of the members will be implemented by the end of this year. So we have in total around 5 carriers now using the standard. It means that everyone can go and subscribe to APIs and get the schedule in a format, the same format from different partners. It's still in a beta version, and we're aiming to release the final version as we speak by the end of the year.
That's good news. And we have another question here for you from the audience, saying that minimum data sets can come from the international organizations such as IMO, yet every country and every port has additional data requirements. And the same goes for ICT solutions. Data protocols are of big variety and are evolving as well. Such mixture needs also governing body for all stakeholders to decide on new data requirements and also the technical applications. So how could such global governing body be formed?
I think it's about collaboration because we are coming from different angles. So ports, terminals, these are different commercial, also semi-governmental, sometimes bodies. But it's good to have a reference and to have a baseline that we work with the same terminology. Just like mentioned by my fellow speakers, IMO Compendium released their publication many years ago. And at DCSA, we made sure that our standard is aligned with the terminology used exactly in an IMO compendium. So it's the same estimated, requested, planned, and maybe it touches on the smaller scope, but again, the names and the data attributes are very much in line. How to deal with, again, the differences in our publications and in our standards. We have mandatory data attributes. For example, you cannot send estimated time of arrival berth without mentioning IMO number of the vessel. So this is for sure a mandatory data attribute, but there are also optional data attributes. And these are the one that is going to be, of course, the way how you send the message can be still more extensive message by one party and maybe less information by another. By the bare minimum is something that standard, of course, resolves.
Thanks a lot. So as you mentioned, collaboration is paramount. Gerald, you have been practicing collaboration amongst competitors. What are the main obstacles and why is it so challenging to overcome them?
Yeah, the whole concept of HVCC is based on collaboration. We are a joint venture between two competing terminal operators here in the Port of Hamburg. That's our shareholder structure. Our day-to-day operation, the coordination together with the Hamburg Port Authority is a unique public-private collaboration. And we also collaborate with all the members of Slavia's DCSA and many service providers here in the Port of Hamburg. What was for us really an eye-opener was looking into the other industries, such as the airport and airline industry. And there we visited twice an airport here in Europe, and they were faced with exactly the same problems and challenges, that globally airports and airspaces became even every day busier. They had to cope with the infrastructure, with growing aircrafts. And the solution here really was to have a collaborative approach towards data availability, coordination between stakeholders, providing clear, accurate, transparent information. And that was back in 2009 already a blueprint for us as HVCC to start such a collaborative approach here also in the Port of Hamburg. And we started approaching terminals, carriers, the Port Authority, nautical service providers on the idea to adopt this concept from the airport and airline industry. And today we know by heart really from the feeder and barge coordination that there is a conflict between the interest of the vessel operator and the terminal. The one wants to get the vessel as quick as possible through the port. The other one tries to realize a high berth utilization. We know by heart the daily situation on the River Elbe, that one terminal operator needs to do something for another terminal operator. One carrier needs to change their plan to achieve something for a competing party. So therefore, this collaborative decision-making is really something that we adopted here in the Port of Hamburg. And it's nothing that you do overnight. It's nothing that you do by contract. It's really about trust. It's about being neutral. It's about very sensitive approach towards data usage, etc. And at the end of the day, it's something that people really, they need to adopt this willingness for a collaborative approach and this collaborative decision making. But it's, as I said, nothing that you can dictate via contract or as a mandatory approach. It's something that must come from the organization, and in particular from people who are related to that organization.
Thank you. So, same topic, Slavia. In an interview, your colleague Thomas Bagge said alignment among rival carriers is the key, and the first step is creating a future roadmap for digital standards. Is the future roadmap already mapped out, and how can cooperation between rivals work beyond the roadmap?
Yes, of course, we do have a roadmap already for multiple topics. We work on a digital trade, where you probably know e-bill of lading is one of our standards, where all carriers have a commitment of 100% EBL adoption. But there is a number of other topics that and other standards being under development now and will be released next year, end of the year. The same for operational efficiency gains as well. We do have in a pipeline consolidated booking forecast, aside from our just-in-time standards and operational vessel schedules. There are also work to be done on the joint working procedures. So the roadmap is in place. Again, it comes down to the speed of implementation. And here I would like to resonate with implementation is not very, let's say, unique or very, it's a common problem for everyone, because you need to prioritize, you need to have an investment for that. You need also to get your organization ready technically for this journey, and it goes on its own pace for everyone. So we have a very high level of dependency, but at the same time, there is a way of forced collaboration. So we need to wait for each other and we need to test with each other. So speaking of how do we work with the rivals, of course, each carrier is a separate commercial entity. And of course, they have a different business operating model, and they have different priorities as well to work on the different topics. And in DCSA, for instance, we see on the adoption level, we have a number of standards, And some carriers are starting from one side of the spectrum, another one is starting in the middle. And that is, again, it's individual journey. The question here is, are we looking into the same problems to solve? And if you have those, for instance, like with the EBL or with the operational vessel schedule or just-in-time port calls planning, then again, it's the willingness of moving towards the same mission, and it's a willingness to collaborate, because we do recognize, and it's very well recognized by our founding members, that you can't solve these things alone. You do need to wait for your counterparties to be also ready to play part in it.
Thanks very much, Slavia. And from your experience, Captain Subra, how do you rate ports on data collaboration? And what are the main objections of ports concerning data collaboration, and what motivates these objections? And then additional question from the audience, don't geopolitical tensions make it impossible to build a common system?
Yeah, I think the collaboration part is very important. There has to be collaboration between various parties when we are building a community system or a single window system. But it takes a lot of discussion and exchange of information. And I think this is where various parties has to work together. And I think this is where we also have an opportunity to learn from one another. I think many parts of the world have, or some parts of the world have already successfully implemented some of the systems. And it can be a learning example for the rest of the ports around the world. In terms of geopolitical issues, when we come to implementing such systems, I don't think that's it's a major issue. As long as we subscribe to common standards, we all agree to collaborate and share data, I think we can move this agenda forward. It's not a big issue if we are faced with geopolitical issues. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. That's good to hear. So let's move on a bit. Gerald, HVCC is not to be mixed up with a port community system, but as we understand, you are interconnected to Hamburg's port community system. From your perspective, how are port community systems amplifying communication, coordination, and data sharing among port players?
Yeah, here in the Port of Hamburg, we have the special situation that we have one of the oldest port community system which has been established, I think, worldwide in the early 80s, was operated by Dacosi. And we decided some years ago that our software is owned by HVCC, certainly, but it is hosted by Dacosi. So these two systems are sitting physically next to each other. And therefore, any relevant information which our terminal shareholders are reporting towards the PCS here in Hamburg, but is relevant for us as well, we can easily adopt and integrate into our system. And vice versa, we have the agreement that any vessel-related data, which is naturally with HVCC, for example, a change in ETA and change in ETD or whatsoever, but also the work that we are conducting at the moment with the DCSA to implement the topic of operational vessel schedule, that these set of data we can also provide to Dacosi for the port community system to use it in the import message platform or export message platform of Dacosi. So that is, I think, a great benefit if these two work along each other and are sharing data within one platform. And this is I think also quite unique how we do this here in the Port of Hamburg.
Great. Gerald, can you very quickly say what kind of data is being shared within a PCS and how these data are processed?
Yeah, I would distinguish here the PCS data, the cargo-related data, and the vessel-related data. So all the booking informations, also data about dangerous goods, etc. This is within the port community system. And as I said, the vessel-related data, so if the IMO number, the vessel name, the operational vessel schedule, that is hosted in our systems. But both systems have interfaces with each other to communicate and to share data most effectively here for the port.
Okay, thanks a lot. So speaking of interconnectivity and interoperability in today's IT landscape, Slavia, how advanced are we to interconnect the essential systems, and what is needed to ensure smooth end-to-end exchange? Can you quickly answer that one?
Yes, of course. I think we are getting maybe not that far, but much further than we were 10 years even ago. If we look at the past decade, and not only because of a COVID, but other reasons came into play, I think we can see more and more connections done on a more individual level. And the topic of scalability coming more into play, because now we do have parties connecting the systems, but it's not yet scalable solution on the worldwide level. So this is another problem of implementation journey. You start small, you test it, you make it work in a few locations, and then you question, how do you make it work everywhere? And this is much a bigger topic. And I think we are moving very good pace. Of course, it's always rather yesterday than tomorrow, but we have to be also realistic in how different parties and the different organizations have an IT system legacy, and it cannot be changed overnight. It cannot be changed also very fast. And again, if you are ready and your partner is not ready, it slows down the process. Or your customer is ready, but you are still struggling to enable it in a few regions and more than just one location. Again, this is a slow process. But I strongly believe we are moving a very good direction, and every day we do make a progress. In DCSA, for instance, we see when the standards are being adopted by non-DCSA members, by solution providers, by terminal operating systems providers. That is already a much further ahead than I would say we were in the beginning of this journey. So yes, we are still have a long way to go, but we are moving in a good direction.
Very good to hear. We have a question here from Georgia, who is working on the National Maritime Single Window for the country. And Slavia, can you quickly say what kind of relationship you have with customs and what kind of difficulties you may face in this process?
Oh, yes, of course, because we have, as I mentioned, covering EBL standards, and that is the document that is traveling not only between the carriers, but actually between a lot of stakeholders, including also customs. And as in our ambition and our mission at DCSA to drive adoption of global standards, not only within the carriers. So there is a multiple activities taking place from a digital trade perspective by our team to actually make sure that not only on national level, but also on the legislative level, EBL is the way forward and can be accepted by other parties. And it's not only about electronic bill of lading. Right now, it's most of our efforts, but we do have another also documentation that is, again, has to travel through the customs, including different authorities. It has to be also allowed and accepted on the legal level so that parties can make business. It also has to travel through banks, for instance. And that is where we, for one of example, we also establish FIT Alliance, which is a future international trade, together with the SWIFT, together with the FIATA, together with the International Chamber of Commerce. And this is a kind of, it's very important work to bring this dialogue together. So we do have challenges as everyone else there, but we drive this dialogue further than just, okay, one stakeholder problem. It's a common system goal.
Thanks very much. So one question we have here, which also surely moves our viewers, is on data collaboration. So one aspect that complicates the contractual aspects in particular is the question of ownership of the data. Is a solution emerging for that, and who should take the lead in setting this contractual framework? Government, port authority, or private parties? Maybe Gerald, you can comment on that one.
I think it's always a matter between who's exchanging with whom data. If we exchange data with the Port Authority, of course, it's a data exchange agreement between the two of us. If we exchange data with DCSA or a carrier, then it's a pure private data exchange agreement. But I'm very aware of the urgency of that topic. We started exchanging data with the Port of Rotterdam back in 2018. And I always like to tell the story that the technical setup, it took us half a day. Defining the data exchange agreement. So what are we allowed to do with the data, and what is Port of Rotterdam allowed to do with our data? That took us 6 months, and that's the pure nature of the sensitivity of exchanging data. But you can overcome it with a trustful collaboration, I would say.
Captain Subra, do you have a quick view on this sensitive issue?
Yeah, there is no easy solution to this. I think everybody wants to be holding on to their own data, and when they want to exchange with another party, they want to make sure that there is confidentiality and the data is secured. So I think there has to be the parties who are involved in the data exchange have to agree on the whole the whole system, that how they're going to exchange the data and what it's going to use for, and it should not be falling into the wrong hands. So I think in IAPH we had this issue as well when we did a survey a couple of years ago as to what was the barriers in terms of data sharing. I think one was the one that came out, the main issue that came out was the lack of trust between the parties. And I think this is something that we need to do more to break down this barrier. But at the same time, people want to be assured that their data is secure and only are used by the parties who are authorized. So I think here the government can play a role in setting the base standards on confidentiality, and that can be a guideline for all parties, so that we don't put different standards to different parties, and then that is where I believe when Gerard said that it takes 6 months, just to come to terms with your neighboring port. I think we need to avoid those kind of things, and if we have a standard format on how agreements can be done, I think we can move this forward quickly.
Thank you so much.
I can echo that.
Okay, thanks, Slavia.
It's really important on realizing what will be done with your data. That's what we face also every day. The data ownership is described in standards. But again, like once my data reaches a certain party, what has to be done with this data? So when the understanding is there, then the fear is also decreasing. But it's a difficult topic, of course, to open up and to start just asking for the data.
And if I may add one more thing from our perspective, that's if you have the trust between the two parties, that's the first step. But then comes another topic, which we could talk about another hour. It's the topic of cybersecurity in future, to ensure that Captain Subra just mentioned it, that the data keeps in the right hands. That's a very important topic for the future.
Right. So there are many organizations trying to solve the same problems or similar problems. Gerald, you mentioned before the definition of estimated time of arrival. Do you think that too many cooks spoil the broth? And what are your thoughts? Can you have a very quick one, Captain Subra?
No, I don't think that's the way it should be approached. What's important is we need to collaborate. There are a lot of things happening around the world, and therefore we don't have a single solution for the whole world. But there are many systems being developed. But what we need is standardization, and just what we spoke about, how data is dealt with, how they are managed. So if we can get these parameters correct, I think the different work that is being done for different purposes can all come together under a single platform. So in my take, the Maritime Single Window is one such platform where you can extend the use for many other applications. For one is many of this data is actually used multiple times. So we can avoid duplication of sending the same data for different purposes. So that's where I think we need to work on the development of more applications using the Maritime Single Window.
Thank you. Slavia, you also collaborate with other organizations to standardize the international trade in the FIT Alliance. So which value do you see for the port industry coming from the electronic bill of lading?
Yes, as I mentioned, we established it a few years ago, and so far it's already is a great result, because when you address the same common problem to the governmental bodies, but then you're not alone in that, it of course has a extra weight on it. But also this interconnectivity with the legal issues, with administrative, with authorities, it's a lot to take in for one party and for one stakeholders. For ports, of course, getting rid of the paper documentation, it also enables the cargo flow through the port faster. Because right now I do not have a stats by the hand, but everyone knows that we do have numerous delays on releasing cargo just because of documentation is not ready, is not cleared. And a part of that is, of course, traveling of a paper document instead of enabling the data flow. So that's a big step, aside from the story that if you, of course, reduce the documentation, paper-based documentation, it's also a very good contribution to the emission savings. But again, for the operational, for the port perspective, it's less delays and less blockers, so enabling also terminals to operate more efficiency and faster to clear the cargo, which is to the benefit of all the parties involved in that, also, of course, to the carriers.
Thank you very much, Slavia. So we are running a bit over time, and so we have not yet touched the issue of when will seamless data exchange in our industry be available, and what is with the decarbonization issues and the corridors in how to digitalize the maritime supply chain. So maybe let's just wrap it up here and give our three speakers the opportunity to conclude by giving us some brief thoughts on the future of what I just mentioned, and in general of Maritime Single Window, Port Community System and Port Call Optimisation. So how is it likely to develop over the next 5 years? So if you can just 1 minute each, please. Maybe Slavia, you can start.
I think we are in a good state to realize that that is a shared responsibility and shared ambition. Therefore, we need to work together and also to share not only good examples and good practices, but also the problematic and struggles that we face throughout the implementation phase of standard solutions and the standards itself. I believe that we have a very good first steps made in that direction on the global stage. For instance, 2 seconds on a digital corridor, it's exactly an example where the ports very far away from each other, for example, Rotterdam and Singapore digital corridor, sharing the experience on how they go through the standardization and actually in a different way, but we're still talking about the same data set. So that is a great, I think, movement. And in the next 5 years, I hope that we will see the critical mass being much larger than today. And it will, at a certain point of a journey, it will ease its own results and help to move forward to the parties that are less advanced right now and still have barriers to move. Oh, it's very exciting.
Okay, thank you, Gerald.
In my view, we have to overcome still the issue of transparency, trust, and collaboration. We touched that. We are right now in a stage that we are starting to implement all over the globe. And Slavia just mentioned quite correctly that we have to not only implement it locally, but to have to form digital corridors to prove the interoperability of all these systems. I believe that we have to translate the benefits of all these port call optimization in terms of bunker emissions, efficiency gains, also into a sustainability reporting. So to really prove the benefits for the whole supply chain, B2B considerations need to take into consideration. And there, I think we have to link more and more the operational data with the whole overall supply chain data. In future, I would like to refer here also to the environmental ship index from the IAPH, which was come into place a couple of years ago. I mentioned the topic of cybersecurity, which is very important in today's world. I come back to the airline industry. I was impressed by this continuous improvement culture. They live there. So this is also something that we have to establish between the stakeholders. And one big wish for the future, we have to keep the standards as standards and not to find a Hamburg standard on the DCSA and DCSA is implementing something else all over the world. So this is really important to keep the standard as a standard.
Thank you very much. And Captain Subra.
Yeah, overall, I think we need to understand the objectives of what we're doing. Digitalization is one of the best tools that we have come up with. I think what we need is more collaboration. And, at the end game is we are all looking towards improving the efficiency of our industry, the efficiency of our maritime transport and the logistics industry. We are trying to optimize the use of resources and reduce wastage. And in the end, of course, it's all about decarbonization and addressing the environmental issues. So I think digitalization is one of the best tools that we have at hand now. But we have discussed the issues that we are facing. But I think we are in a better place than where we were 5 years ago. So that is a progress. So I think we should consider that we have made a lot of progress here, and therefore we need to keep pushing this forward.
Thank you very much indeed for your closing statements. And let's wrap up this episode now. And I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all three of you, our guests, for your expertise, dedication to the world of port and logistics, and for sharing your knowledge and insights with us in this Connecting Ports talk show. So thank you very much indeed. And to our audience, thank you very much for tuning in today and being part of this journey. So we hope you found today's discussions enlightening and thought-provoking. We all need to remember the world of ports is not just about ships and cargo, it's about the people and ideas that keep it moving forward. There are a couple of questions in the chat, and we will address them to the speakers, so we will provide the answers. Unfortunately, we could not make it in time today, but we keep going. So this session, as usual, has been recorded and will be made available shortly via our website and YouTube. And big thanks, as usual, to our production team behind the scenes and Port of Hamburg Marketing, who provided the studio and technical support. And Our next session of Connecting Ports will continue debating what matters, focusing on rethinking port economics. Please join us again on the 6th of December, and until then, bye-bye and tschüss from Hamburg.